Alright, guys, so let's get into it. In just one day, the global economy will change forever. Trump is coming back, and he's going to shake up the US like never before. And in this video, we want to make things more about you. What are the opportunities to profit from this chaos? There's nothing much you can do about a tariff war. You can't reverse the US China confrontation, but you can take steps to protect your wealth and even grow it. Now, some are very obvious, but others are areas people are still overlooking. And before we start, we need to make an assumption here that Trump will fulfill his promise and begin America's global trade war. And to do that, he would have to invoke emergency economic powers to embark on his universal tariff plan. And this would mean a 10% flat tax on all imports coming into the United States. In addition, China will be hit with a 60% tariff on everything. Now, these are highly protectionist measures that dwarfs everything we have seen before. On day one, Trump has also promised to impose a 25% tariff on all products imported from Mexico and Canada. And considering these are the biggest trading partners of the US, there will be huge consequences. Now, for this video, we're going to assume Trump keeps his promise and moves the US economy inwards. As always, there will be certain assets, sectors, and countries that would benefit, and others not so much. Trump is going to flip everything on its head. We could see mass deportations in the US, which could explode prices upwards. The damage might start in US farms, but it will clearly spread to grocery stores and supermarkets. And are you ready for that? We could see a resurgence in inflation. And if the economy doesn't collapse, we could continue to get a market melt up. The wealth divide is going to get worse. And let's talk about the tariff war. Although prices will be going up in the US, there will be winners in this big reshoring exercise. The US would have to bring home a lot of industries. On the left, we can see domestic production for goods has been collapsing from 77% in 2002 to less than 68% 20 years later. Meanwhile, the chart on the right shows us America's import reliance on key critical minerals. From cobalt and nickel to copper and rare earths, the US is importing the majority of their essential minerals, over 90% in some cases. Trump wants to be less reliant on global supply chains and to bring home as much production as possible. So big industries will be moving back to the US. Some will come from the EU, others from Canada. The US industrial sector would benefit from this. In addition, energy companies and utilities, for example, could be big winners. And what do you need to drive this reshoring? You need power and you need energy, lots of it. Even if US consumers are broke, the government could increase the deficits to pay for it. There's a clear reason why big oil in the US they are celebrating. Your Exxons, your Chevrons are probably having a party in the boardroom today. Trump's return means a bigger need for reliable energy on demand, which all points to fossil fuels. But let's talk about another clear winner. It sounds counterintuitive, but not really. If Trump goes all in with his tariffs, China will be an even bigger winner down the line. A few days ago, the new head of the Treasury said China was collapsing. They are in a recession or depression. But let's cut through his personal opinion and look at the data here. In Q4 this year, China's economy grew by 5.4%. This pulls up the entire year's GDP to 5% for 2024. But note that Morgan Stanley said 60% of the annual growth rebound comes from China's policy to boost consumption. Beijing's stimulus is working and they have promised more if Trump goes pedal to the metal. We can expect trillions of yuan to be pumped in to boost not just the banking sector but consumers directly as well. Now, Chinese stocks as a whole are cheap. The threat of tariffs, they are surprising price discovery. By flooding the economy with stimulus, Beijing can reverse this and unlock the value of Chinese companies. Major Chinese cities like Shanghai have declared GDP targets of 5% in 2025. That won't be possible unless the stimulus comes, which makes it even more likely for the government to step in. Now, just the impact of a 20% tariff would be brutal. According to Goldman, it could hammer China's GDP by almost a full percentage point in Q2 this year. And this gives them a very binary choice. You either accept lower growth or fight it out with the US, and you provide a big dose of stimulus. Chances are Beijing will provide the support to maintain their economic influence. So Trump's trade war is going to benefit key US industries. It's also a tailwind for China long term if more stimulus comes. And that's the macro picture of the tariffs. But let's cover the most obvious as well. There's one asset I'm more bullish about in the years to come, much more than US stocks or even Chinese equities, and that is gold. Why? Because the amount of deficit spending is going to explode. And as we said before, reshoring heavy industries is not something that can be done on the cheap. Now, since 2019, spending on US industrial plants has more than doubled. Trump started the process and Biden, he kept the ball rolling. Construction spending on manufacturing is going up. If you have to build more cars, semiconductors, tractors, and oil rigs, you have to ramp up the deficits. More money will be poured into infrastructure spending. But just like the Inflation Reduction Act, will this spending raise or bring down inflation? It doesn't take a genius to know the bigger the deficits, the more wastage of government money. US Senator Rand Paul did a study on how bad government waste is, and in 2022, he found wasteful spending reached nearly $900 billion. That's like half of the annual US deficit. Now, we have to remind everyone that deficit spending isn't necessarily bad. If you can drive growth and production up enough, it's good spending, but clearly not for the US, which is a big problem because over the next 10 years, Trump will add over $7 trillion to the national debt. Now, how much of that amount will be wasted and drive inflation even higher? So, even before taking office, Trump is already shaking up the US stock market and the world. Concerns about his tariff policies potentially increasing inflation, they have led to reduced expectations for rate cuts, causing a recent decline in the US stock market. During Trump's first term, the S&P 500 index rose by 68%. So is the recent decline in US stocks a risk or an opportunity? Are you concerned about volatility or investing at a market peak? Regular investment is the ideal solution. This strategy of investing a fixed amount regularly helps you to reduce the impact of volatility by spreading your investments over time. Now, I personally prefer using Moomoo regular savings plan to invest for the long term, and it's very easy to set up your own personal plan. In addition, Moomoo also offers zero commission trading of US stocks and ETFs, and this can save us a lot of money in the long term. Using Moomoo for regular investment is very simple. Open the app, go to the RSP section and choose the stock or ETF you want to invest in. Next, set your investment amount and frequency, and then click confirm to start. You can adjust your plan anytime. And it gets better, guys. Moomoo has exciting welcome rewards waiting for you. You will be able to get a stock bundle worth up to $2,266 waiting for you. And this includes one share of Tesla as well. Use my link in the description box and get an additional $20 when you sign up. So don't wait. Give Moomoo a try and start investing today. The CBO just released their latest report on the US budget outlook for 2025. It's so important that I'll leave a link in the video's description below. You'll want to sit down for this one. In 2025, the US deficit will increase again by at least $100 billion to $1.9 trillion. And by 2035, the US government will have to spend an additional 2.7 trillion annually that they don't have. And where will the money come from? Either the Federal Reserve, they'll print it and directly cause more inflation, or the US government will have to swipe their national credit card and make the debt crisis even worse. And either way, this leads to more government wastage. More money will flow to people at the top. And what do? They buy assets including gold. Note that we haven't even mentioned about the BRICS countries buying more. We haven't even talked about the US dollar sanctions yet. Those are important and they'll drive gold demand. But a bigger factor going forward will be the US deficit crisis. Indirectly, Trump's second term is good news for gold in the years to come. And this is why, over the long term, asset prices will continue to go higher and higher. There might be a crash, but this chart confirms the debasement of the dollar. We have reached a historic turning point. Interest payments on the US debt will be bigger than the primary deficit itself. Just to pay off bondholders, the government will have to borrow even more money. While Trump wants to reduce the deficit to 3% of GDP, it's virtually impossible without massive pain. Either he defaults on paying US creditors or he cuts critical spending. However, he can't do either or his reshoring exercise will collapse. But let's cover the next winning sector in the US economy. Oil and gas could be big winners in a Trump presidency. Now, Trump has made it very clear that he wants the US oil and gas boom to continue. He's pro deregulation for the oil industry. This would include building more energy infrastructure to support growth. More importantly, secure more drilling leases to pump out the oil and gas in the first place. Under Joe Biden, offshore oil and gas drilling permits dropped to an all-time low. His admin focused on green energy and decided to curtail the growth of big oil. But all that could change in the next few years. To be fair, oil companies didn't just face tougher regulations, they faced higher expenses, especially when rates went from near zero to over 5%. The biggest threat big oil faces is falling energy prices. OPEC is expected to increase production by 2 million barrels a day this year. So, this increase in supply could bring down the price of crude. But Trump might just be able to keep revenues flowing to oil companies in the US. He has a captive customer, and that is Europe. Back in December, Donald Trump threatened the EU. They have to buy more US oil and gas to reduce the deficit. And if they don't, Trump could impose brutal tariffs on the bloc. Now, not so good news for the Europeans, but fantastic news for US energy producers. Even if the global price of oil and gas drops, they can count on Europe to pay a premium. In the perspective of the US, this is a very smart move to squeeze Europe further. They can't sell into the US consumer market if they don't support big oil. And here's what we mean. Before the war, the EU imported only 15 million tons of US LNG a year. But after the war, this amount almost quadrupled. In 2022 and 2023, Europe bought 55 million tons annually. So if you're buying US oil and gas stocks, you need to watch what happens across the Atlantic. If Trump brings Europe to heel, it's fantastic news for American energy. But let's talk about the last sector that could experience a big boom, and unfortunately, that will be the US prison system. And let's not forget what Trump has promised in 2025.
Back in the White House, I will terminate every open borders policy of the Biden administration and begin the largest deportation operation in American history.
So mass deportations in the US could be coming to a city near you. The scale of the operation will be massive, and the amount of money spent will be tremendous. There are around 11 million undocumented immigrants, around 3.3% of the population. And here's where things get really wild. A one-time operation to deport them would cost over $350 billion. Deporting a million a year would cost $88 billion. And the total cost could spread over a decade, and that would add up to nearly $1 trillion. So mass deportation will cost a bomb. The US will have to spend 3 to 4% of GDP to send everyone home. Now, I know this is a very contentious subject, but let's assume Trump does it. Well, who will be the biggest winners? Where would the money flow to? It would be to the US prison system. Companies like Geo Group could stand to win big from this, and that's why the stock has more than doubled since Trump's win. They provide the detention services, and ICE, the deportation agency, is their biggest customer. Trump deporting millions is going to be great for private prisons. Now, I have to state, this is a line that I won't cross. I also don't buy into the military-industrial complex, but that's just me. So Trump's return is going to be seismic. His day one policies are truly frightening, and I don't think we can quantify the effects yet. But there will be winners and there will be losers. Big oil is going to benefit. The EU will be squeezed to benefit US energy companies. Gold will also benefit the more that Trump spends. Trying to fight a tariff war is expensive, and this will cause deficits to explode higher. So if you want to profit from Trump's second coming, pay attention to all these assets. But let me know what you think. How will Trump affect the global economy and asset prices? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.